Dearly beloved, we have gathered here today to get through this thing called Mix CD. My name is Mike, part of the SPDM crew, and I love making Mix CDs. Each week, we give our guests a theme and an 80-minute time limit for which songs they're going to pick for their Mix CD. All right, this week on Mix CD, we are changing up the format a little bit, and we're going to be talking about kind of just the evolution of what it's been like to listen to music with the changing of mediums. So we go from tape to mix CDs to the iPod, where you still had to, you were able to cram in a lot more than you could with a CD, but you still had a finite amount of space, especially if you had those iPad or iPod Nanos versus the iPod Classic, which had 250. Anyways, then talk about how streaming has come about, and then kind of just talking a little bit more about our music taste. So I am joined here by a blogger that I met online. She is known as the Mint Chip Mama. We've got Stacey Wallenstein. How's it going, Stacey? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is going so great. And I am so excited to talk about this topic because music is such a big part of my life, especially 80s and 90s music. And I don't think I could think of a more exciting thing to talk about with you today.
So before we get to that, tell me about the Mint Chip Mama. Tell me, you just like what caused you to start it? How's it going? And just anything that you've got working on the blog right now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, The Mint Chip Mama is a blog that I launched about 10 years ago, and it was kind of to marry writing things about events and products and amusement parks and all kinds of family fun things to do in the tri state area and beyond. In addition, like thought pieces of kind of what young moms and young families were going through. And I launched it because I was writing for a bunch of different mediums, but I wanted a space where I can kind of go all over the place and write about everything that was going on in front of me because, to be honest, like most of the things going on in front of me was going on in front of all the other young families I was encountering. And, people kind of started to understand that I knew about where to go or what was going on. And so instead of just having the same conversation 100 times, I started posting about it so I could share articles, and it's been really great, and it's fun to see how it's evolved as my life has evolved. My kids, I in fact only had 2 kids when I started it. I now have 3 kids, so that was a very natural expansion.
Very
But
nice.
yes, thank you. And it's really, as my kids have gotten older, they're now 8, 11, and 14. I've kind of gotten back to basics about like what I'm about and what I'm interested in, which is travel, food, beauty, different lifestyle things like yoga. And really, I'm a huge fan of the 80s and 90s. And I feel that whether it is consciously or subconsciously, I infuse a lot of 80s and 90s stuff into everything I do. I
Mhm.
was very, very excited to be a press person at 90s Con last March, which
Very
was
nice.
amazing. Totally interesting. My first con experience, and it was certainly an experience,
Yeah.
somewhat of a social experiment, but I have a background in psychology, and that was even more fascinating. But really, just kind of, I think right now there's so much complication in the world that everyone is kind of happily reverting back to this retro period of when we were younger, when things were simpler, pre smartphone, pre cell phone, and just going back to like, thinking about it, being a kid and maybe being at a concert when you were younger, the first concert, just all kinds of good feelings like that.
Yeah, great stuff. We'll be sure to link the address for the blog, as well as any other social media in our episode description, and then when we blast this episode out. So check out the Mint Chip Mama. Lots of great stuff on there. Got a chance to peruse through it, and as a fellow parent as well, I just love hearing about other parents' experiences and just any just fun ways that you could share that. So appreciate your work on that,
Thank
and
you.
just looking forward to future collaborations because you and I have
Yeah.
talked a little bit about
Yeah.
just doing more stuff 80s and 90s related because that is kind of the sweet spot for
Hmm.
both of us. I would consider myself more of a 90s kid because
Yep.
I was born mid 80s, and it's still something that still feel that I can say that I'm an 80s kid because I did
Yep.
live through at least half of the 80s, And boy, the music was just it just defined so much of my musical taste, the influences that happened from the 80s and 90s. So why don't we start there? What specific music do you like from the 80s and 90s, and what kind of stands out for you in terms of either artist, type of song, genre, anything like that?
So I have to say that when I sit back and think of like what the epitome of the coolest 80s music experience I can encounter is, or I should say was, I went to this camp when I was, in elementary school, early middle school. So, in the heat of the 80s. And this was like a very basic local camp that was run in our school's high school. So it wasn't part of the school district, but it was held in the school district. And it was a very bare bones camp, but for some reason, everyone loved it. And for some reason, in whatever room it was, they had a game room, which was like, it was the 80s. So it was like the old fashioned arcade games. It was like the height of cool. And in the middle was this jukebox. And it blasted the music that was so much of that time that just, when I close my eyes, I just feel like I was in a John Hughes movie. And it was songs like The Promise and songs, all of these amazing, Tainted Love, all of this. And when I hear those songs, it just brings me back to that moment in this game room at camp. And it was just the best. And we used to have this, I guess it was an annual Name That Tune contest. And I won it
Mm,
every year. I would be
very
able to
nice.
name the artist and the song by the first note. And just to date myself, the winner got to pick any vinyl album,
Oh,
because that's what it was that they
mhm.
wanted. And I remember picking Expose. Yep. And it was like
That's
my
perfect.
prized possession. And it's funny because I was just on a cruise with my husband, and there was like an 80s night, and there was like like a trivia 80s night, and they had, two captains come up, and I said I didn't want to participate, but in my head I named every song on the first note, and the girl was like naming it on the second note, and everyone's like, how do you do that? And I'm like, if only I wanted to stand up, I could show that girl down. But it's
Right.
it's so much fun, and I feel like that music just brings you back to those good times. And I mean, if I hear the song The Promise, like I have to stop, I have to sing it out. Like I feel like there are so many songs like that that just bring you back to that youth and innocence, and just, Born in the USA and Eye of the Tiger. And my neighbor across the street, who is maybe 10 years older than us, would wash his car every week to Eye of the Tiger. And it's like, I mean, how much more of like a high school boy in the 80s thing could you think of than that, right?
Right.
And
That's
so just so much of that music is just, incredible. And I feel like on one hand, 80s music is my favorite and my go-to. And if you were to ask my Alexa, the most common phrase that she hears is, Alexa, play 80s pop on Pandora. And it just makes you feel happy and makes you feel good. And, it's just incredible. But with that said, I feel like 90s music, like you said, even though, part of it is 80s, you also feel that part of it is 90s. I feel like there's kind of this hand in hand with it, where maybe it's less like Euro and British influenced of the stuff
mhm.
that I listen to. And maybe it's a little more poppy, but I feel very much like it's 80s and 90s together that, make you happy. And you think of like a CNC Music Factory in the early 90s. And I think about like when all of our friends were having bar and bat mitzvahs, and the songs that when I hear them, I still remember like the dancers from the DJ companies doing their, you see them every week doing the same things. And I mean, I can't say or think about these things without smiling. And when I had my 40th birthday a couple years ago, I said, all I want is to go to a dive bar with a dance floor and play 80s and 90s music and have like the most basic low key party. And I did that, and the DJ was incredible. I mean, this was like the DJ at the bar. It wasn't like I interviewed and hired it just by happenstance.
Mhm.
And everybody that attended had the same feeling, where it just was so much fun to have like a dance party to these old songs, that I ended up doing a 41st birthday party back at the
Oh,
same
nice.
place, because everyone was like, that was literally the best party that I've been to. And I think the whole thing cost me like $100, because I was
Oh,
like, I don't
nice.
want to rent the place out. Like you get so like caught up in all these things. And I was like, I want simple, I want to show up, I want to have fun. I just want to dance. Like I wanted a big fat dance party. And that's what it was. It was just 80s and 90s music. And it was awesome. But I mean, like, oh God, all these things make me so happy.
Yeah. No, I'm the same exact way. So Every Wednesday night, I host trivia at a bar, and
Oh,
I always end the night playing either 80s or 90s music. The last two rounds, I always do that because
yeah.
one, I'm in charge of the fucking playlist. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna play what I want to play. But at the end of the day as well, my trivia participants, they all are kind of the same age as me, and 80s and 90s is just the sweet spot. Look,
Yeah.
I got a couple younger teams that kind of give me a little bit of crap saying, "Can you please play more modern stuff?" And I'm like,
No.
"No, I'm in charge
Get
of the
out.
jukebox." But a lot of the times what happens is I play a song and they're like, "I've heard this before. Where have I heard this before?" And one of two things happens. One, they say something really hurtful, like, "Oh, it was on the oldie station." I'm like, "Okay,
No, I do not accept that.
I don't like that." But another thing that they say is, "I've heard this because it was sampled in a song that I heard recently." I'm
Yep.
like, yeah, you because that stuff, just
Yep.
like a lot of stuff from the 80s and 90s. 80s and 90s right now is very big on television.
Mm-hmm.
Not shows that came out to the time, but shows that take place during the
Mm-hmm.
80s and 90s. Some of the biggest
Yep.
shows on TV are like that. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing with movies right now too, is that a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s are getting remade because
Yep.
it harkens to back in the day when you watched some of those movies, and whether it's a sequel or reboot or reimagining, people just are clamoring from stuff from the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
So, and for me, my musical taste from the 80s and 90s, my I would listen to the ginormous music collection that my dad had. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why I'm a huge Phil Collins and a Genesis fan.
Mm.
That's why I love Prince. And then my
Yeah.
mom on the flip side, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Madonna. Those are
Mm-hmm.
three that I just greatly influenced by
Yep.
my parents' musical taste. And that's the thing that
Yeah.
I just look back to a lot. And I look at the songs that I listen to the most on my Spotify and my Apple Music, setting aside all the songs that I listen to because of my kids. So the last 2 years, my top song that's played on Apple Music has been kids songs, which I tried last year and I was like, I really want to make a conscious effort to listen to more music. So this year, the number one song that is played on my Apple Music is not like a Moana song or a Frozen
Mm-hmm.
song. And of course, I failed at that, and that's fine. I
I
get it.
mean,
As
Frozen has a pretty amazing soundtrack, to be
it
fair.
does have a pretty amazing soundtrack, and as a father to two girls,
Yeah.
yeah, we that's playing nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
But I look back at a lot of the other songs that are on my playlist, and it's all 80s and 90s, all
Yep.
things that I grew up on, and to me are just timeless.
Yep.
And you mentioned that you wanted to talk about a little bit of the evolution
Mm-hmm.
of kind of like the music, the way that we consume music.
Yeah.
So why don't we start there? So
Yeah.
I guess it like if we're going with the 80s, the things that we can start with are cassette tapes and just also conventional radio. Because
Yes.
I have a quick story about conventional radio. So
Yeah.
for the most part, when we drive around, we're usually listening to stuff on Spotify or just, some type of streaming service. So that way we can curate what's on the radio. However, from time to time, we get a car that, or like, let's say if we're going on vacation somewhere and it doesn't have an aux cable or we forget it or our phones die, we have to resort to listen to the regular radio. And I got to tell you, my 7-year-old was like, "What is this? Like, I can't
Mm-hmm.
just pick what I want to
Mm-hmm.
listen to." I'm like, "No,
Patience, child.
believe it or not, this is how we used to listen to music. You didn't know what song was coming next. That was part of the appeal. That's also how you discover new music as
Yep.
well."
I think that's a
So
big point. Yep.
just yeah, just talk about,
Yeah.
where whatever topic you want to start with in terms of how we consume music in, the 80s and 90s, whether it's let's start with either tape or radio, whichever one you want
Yeah.
to talk about first.
Absolutely. So I have a lot to say on both of those and both of those together. But first, I just want to touch on something that you said about Prince and Madonna and some of the artists that you named and Phil Collins. And when you said that, it made me think of music videos. And it made me think of the claymation Phil Collins video and then
Mhm.
Sledgehammer videos. and how that was such a big part of the 80s, right? And the early 90s, pre-TRL, which was a different story. But like
You dropped
those, right?
TRL.
I dropped
Oh.
TRL. But like when you think about those claymations, and that was like the wildest, like incredible technology, right? And I remember that so vividly. And when you said Phil Collins, I thought, this is the world we live in. I don't remember the name of the song, and I'm not going to sing anymore. But that, do you remember that video with
Yeah, I
like the,
do.
oh my God, and that was, and I remember sitting there and just going, whoa, and then sitting in front of the TV in my channel 29, which was MTV, and just waiting for it to cycle back on because there was no other way to get to it. But I want to specifically speak about Madonna, who I have been a huge fan of for however many years I could even mention in decades. But Madonna recently went on tour, and Cyndi Lauper, who's another one of my favorites, recently went on tour. And I said to my daughter, I actually said to my husband, I want to go see both. Do you want to come? He said no. And I said, you know what? I don't want to go with a friend. I want to go with my daughter, our daughter who's now 14. And I said, I want her, who is a fan because she listens to music like, 80s and 90s as well. I was like, I want her to experience these people because she kind of likes them. She doesn't really see them as the oldies people, even though I'm sure she does.
Mhm.
But she totally, as she would say, vibes with their music. So how cool would it be for her to one day be able to say, I saw Madonna in concert or Cyndi Lauper or something? So I took her last year to see Madonna during one of the concerts where she came on so late. And then, I think someone from the audience I was in sued her, which was a whole different story.
Mhm.
And then I took her to see Cyndi Lauper recently, and she knew the music, so she loved it. And it was just
Nice.
kind of a cool experience to have, and both of them were like greatest hits tours, not any of
Mhm.
these, oh, you want to hear my new stuff? No, I don't want to hear your new stuff. Play the stuff from
I
1997
yeah,
and leave me alone.
I bought tickets to hear the hits. Good for you for making new music right now, but I'm good.
I'm
I just
good.
want to
Yeah.
hear
Yes.
the stuff that I love.
I took her over the summer to see. We have this amazing amphitheater out by us at one of the beaches, and it's like I would listen to someone reading the phone book there. It's like the most perfect setting to see a concert, and it was like the New Kids on the Block, 80s and 90s thing. And so I brought her with me to see New Kids, who I love, of course. And then they're like, "We're gonna play our new stuff," and everyone's like, "No,
No, boo.
fast forward." Yeah,
Not even boo. Just like
no,
I look, if I'm gonna listen to New Kids on the Block, which I have old VHS tapes of me and my sister singing along to New Kids on
yeah,
the Block songs. And I played a New Kids on the Block song for my daughter, and she just rolled her eyes because I knew all the words and knew some of the dances from the music videos. And I am so glad that you brought up music videos because back in the day, music videos were events, and you're just waiting for certain music videos to drop, and it was just always an exciting time for
yeah.
that. Back in the day when MTV actually played music instead of
Yes,
just the reality TV network that it has become. But I digress. But
right.
anyways, continue with
Yeah, and
stuff from the 80s.
yeah, and
And
MTV was like the cool young stuff, and VH1 was for the old people, right?
I remember when it switched where I was like, I kind of like some of the stuff on VHS a little bit, or not VHS, VH1 a
Yeah,
little bit better,
yeah.
but yeah.
The unplugged, do you remember they used to do the unplugs or whatever it was called? And that was just awesome. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this is kind of cool, but maybe I just got older and appreciated it more, right?
Well, funny you mentioned that. The movie theater by me, they're playing a special 30th anniversary of the Eric Clapton Unplugged
Oh,
special.
wow.
But it kind of bummed me out a little because it was like, this is 30 years old.
Well, it's like all these shows that we used to watch, they're having all their anniversaries, and you're like, Shh, don't talk. Just let me watch
That's
it and enjoy it.
just let me
Yes,
enjoy it. It doesn't matter
yes,
how old it is. Just I'm
yes,
still enjoying it. I'm still watching it, still appreciating it, still
yes.
appreciating it for sure.
Yes. But anyway, getting back to the radio and cassette. So I have a little guest star, and since this is not a video podcast, you will enjoy it, but
Mhm.
your members will not be able to see it. But I'm going to ask you if you remember this sucker.
Oh, like a boombox type of thing. Yeah. So
So for the,
grow
yes, you want to explain it? This is a mint green. Maybe this is the precursor of me being the mint chip mama, but
maybe, yeah.
with the
So
color. Yeah, go ahead.
we got an old school cassette player. So a cassette boombox with a cassette player up front, giant antenna that you had to kind of move around a little bit in order to what I assume get the radio on there. And yeah, that
With a
sir
mixtape in it. Ready?
oh,
So I'm here. I'm going to set the stage. So this is a mixtape in it. titled Maddie's Birthday Mix, which I assumed I made for my best friend in college.
Okay.
And on this cassette player with a radio, there were many times, let's see if I can angle it even more, that the way that we used to do it in the olden days, because the radio was a total random occurrence of songs, you would hold record, right? And you would wait for the song to come on with pause, and you would let go and hope to catch the beginning of the song, missing the advertisements, missing the commercials, catching the first note, and having a total stressed out reaction because if you missed any of it or had to edit it out, then you had to start all over and wait until it
Yep.
came back up in the cycle of the playlist of the radio station. But kids don't know that anymore. And it's just funny how you can type into Apple Music or wherever you consume your streamed media, play the song, and it plays that song. They don't understand the struggle of having to hold two buttons hovering over or on your Iowa double cassette player, right? Holding the two buttons to wait to play. And it's just, I just find that so funny. So I have had this cassette player for 40 years, 35 years, and I keep it in it plays the radio still. The cassette player doesn't work anymore, but I just find it such a fun conversation piece. And just the same as in my kitchen, I have the clear phone that lights up when it rings because life is short and those things are fun and silly. And so I don't remember what is on Maddie's mix, but next to me I have this tape as well. And I was hoping I had my multicolored Memorex cassettes, but I cannot find them sadly. But this, even though this was in 2000, I would like to have a special allowance to talk about this mixtape because
Absolutely.
so this is a cassette that I made. It was a mix that I made for graduation. I graduated college in 2000, and as a gift to all my closest friends, I made them each a mixtape.
Oh, that's nice.
And
That's fantastic.
the first song on this was Vitamin C's graduation
Gretchen.
song,
Oh, that
because how could
song.
it not be? And
Mhm.
one of my very just to say something funny, I gave everyone a cassette tape and everyone said, "Oh my God, this is so nice. Thank you." I don't know what they did with it. One of my friends said to me, "You can keep it. If it's not a CD, I don't want it." And I was like,
Oh,
"Shouldn't you just say thank you and throw it out?" And it's like a running joke that I'm like, "Who says that?"
right.
But I feel like that shows the evolution where he was like, "I don't want your crappy mix cassette. Like put it on a CD." And at that point, I was like, "Well, I don't have Napster, so how am I supposed to do that?" So we used to consume our music on the radio. It evolved to a cassette, and I remember buying the Janet Jackson Control cassette and thinking that was the greatest thing in the world. Our malls used to have record stores and stores that sold cassettes and Tower Records, and where you would go for the whole night with your friends just to look at cute boys and girls and hear the newest music. Like that's something our kids don't have
Don't get
and don't
they
get, right? And
no.
yeah, go ahead.
So, couple things come to mind. The first time my daughter saw a cassette tape, the first thing she did was she picked it up and she put it to her ear and was like, "I can't hear anything." I'm like,
Oh my God, that's so funny.
No, no, sweetheart. You need to get another device and put it in." And she's like, "Why?" Like, you just don't get it. And
Yeah.
that's fine. You're young. You'll get it one day. But yeah, I just find that hilarious. And I look at kind of it's funny because the evolution of how we consume music, I can actually track for me specifically to one band. And
Okay.
that is NSYNC, actually. And the reason why is because the first NSYNC album that was available, I got the VHS or I keep calling it VHS type, a cassette tape for it
Okay.
because the CD was not available. So I
Okay.
said, I really want NSYNC, so I'm gonna get the cassette tape for it.
Okay. And was that
And
the one of them all like marionettes?
no, it's the one
Oh.
before that. It's
Oh, you're a
the
true fan.
the old school one. So I got that because also my car, or my mom's car rather, it eventually became my car. My mom's car did not have a CD player. It still had a cassette player in it. So I got that. We would listen to it. And then eventually, once the CD became available, I asked my mom, "Can we get it?" And she said no, because you're only going to listen to like the songs on the radio. So you want to know what she encouraged me to do? She
Mm.
encouraged me to get the cassette single for it. Just
Oh.
the one song that you want to listen to a lot. And then the cassette singles were starting to slowly but surely not become a thing. So
Mhm.
then she said, "Why don't you get this?" And instead of the CD, the whole CD, she just asked me to get the CD single. And
Oh,
my daughter, when I kind of would tell her about some of this stuff, was like, so you got a CD with just one song in it? I'm like, yes, period. Like that's all I had for her. Cause it was like, for some people out there who love a specific song and don't want to spend the money on the whole CD, or maybe that's the only song on, like
yeah,
maybe they borrowed it from the library, or
yeah.
they borrowed it from a friend and they found out, you know what, this is the only song I like on the CD. Just get the CD single then. That's fine.
And look, I think we've all been in a position where you buy a CD or a cassette or an album, if you want to go that far back, because you like one song and then you listen to it and you're like, and you just listen to that one song. I thought you were going to say that when you bought the CD, you then got the cord so you could attach your Discman to your car so you
Oh,
could play
well,
it.
we will get to all of that because I definitely did that because there are a lot of ways that you could consume a CD if you don't have a CD player in your car. And the
Yeah.
main way was a Discman that you either
We
plug
should
in
tell them what
the
a Discman is in case they don't know.
we found because we found an old Discman when my mom moved out of like mine and my sister's childhood home, and we found a couple Discmans. And my daughter, same thing, is like, "What's this?" So I showed her. It's like, "Hey, you played when we played music, we would either play something on the Discman and you just put on your headphones, or if you want to listen to it in a car." You would put in either a cassette adapter and it would just play over the car speaker, because otherwise you're just listening to it just via headphones. So
Yeah.
like, so no aux cable or Bluetooth. I'm like, no, none of that stuff was a
No.
thing.
Or in the cigarette lighter, right?
Like, a cigarette lighter. Yes, cannot forget about that, because always the risk when it comes to any type of CD, you risk potentially it skipping or like it getting scratched. Not as big of a deal when it comes to like a cassette tape or anything like that. With the cassette tape, you risk the dreaded, the like all the stuff from the cassette like
The
gets
threading.
out,
Yeah.
and then you got to thread it back through. But
Hmm.
with the CD, it's it getting scratched and maybe
Hmm.
potentially it's skipping, and then the CD is ruined, and then you either find a way to clean it or you just have to get something else.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. It was see, the struggle is real. Kids don't know hardship these days.
They they do not, or their hardship has just evolved into something completely different.
Or it's
So,
Wi-Fi, right? Because I mean, how many times have you tried to listen to something and it says buffering, buffering, buffering? And I go, well, if we just watch the DVD, there would be no buffering. I don't want to watch it. Well, fine. We'll sit here for 20 minutes watching an hourglass. That's fun, right?
yep, that's you're just speaking my language right now,
I'm
and you
speaking
just
your
get it,
language.
and I so appreciate that. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, back to
Evolution.
yeah, let's
Okay.
continue with
So
the evolution of how we consumed music.
So I'll say just something really funny. So it's 2025 now. In 2023, which was 2 years ago, we bought a new car. And the car that we, sold to the dealership in exchange for this new fancy schmancy car was a car that was, you know, old, and it was a station car. And then before that, whatever was in the previous station car was just moved into this car. And the one before that was moved into that. So we were laughing because when I went to clean out this old Honda Accord, in the console was cassettes and CDs, even though the car didn't have a cassette player. And I don't think the CD player worked, but you just move all your junk from one car to the other. That when I was 2023 cleaning
Hmm.
it out, they're like, why are these things in your car? And I'm like, honestly, I don't have a good answer for that, except we just never cleaned it out. But my kids were cracking up that they were like, wow, when's the last time you listened to a cassette? And I'm like, I don't know, but I knew that they were in this console if I needed them, I guess.
There we
Yeah.
go. Very
So
nice.
I think that the evolution, at least how I see it, was from my mint green radio with an antenna, which, as you said, that it made me realize that I don't even know if kid knows what an antenna is these days.
No, no, they definitely don't, because they don't understand the struggle of what it's like when you get the
Trying to get the
static, and
waves.
you just gotta figure out the best position for the
Yeah.
antenna for a particular song, because when you're trying to record something and the static comes up and
Yep.
you're frantically trying to adjust the antenna so it's clear, and then you forget about it and you're listening to it and like, oh, that's right, yeah, I need to either figure out a way to re-record this or just be okay with the
Yeah.
static.
Or then
Yeah,
when you listen to it over and over again on the recorded tape, you would know the exact point that it would bleep. And then as you sang it, you just sang that into the song, right?
exactly, exactly.
So I would say that I went from my mint green 80s cassette mini boombox to, these CDs. And of course, the I think the most amazing radio or stereo you could talk about is the Iowa, where it had the single CD, then the 3 CD, and then all your fancy friends with the 5 CD, which was just the stuff that dreams were made of, right? With
Right.
the giant speakers on the side that took up half of a dresser
Hmm.
just to listen to the radio or cassettes or CDs or record players. If you, some of them had the record player on the top, if you remember.
Yeah.
And then, we moved into CDs. And I think by the 90s, at least the mid 90s, CDs were where it was at.
Hmm.
And then I remember getting very into the very fabricated infomercial CDs of mixes of Forever 80s and Everything 80s and love ballads. And, for 19.99 plus 3.95 shipping, you could order it and it would show up in your house. And then somebody at Jelly Bean Recordings or whatever would send you all the songs you love in one CD. And you'd be like, wow, it's like a mixtape, but someone else
Exactly.
made it and it's a CD,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
then those were great. And I have many of those. And then I almost feel like we should take a moment to talk about jock jams. Do you have some feelings about that? Y'all ready for this?
Yeah. Yeah. Jock Jams was huge when
Huge.
I was in school, and just what a perfect way just to get you pumped up,
Oh
perhaps
my
pumped
God.
up the jam for in order for us to just whether it's a dance, going out with friends, anything like that. And I have multiple playlists on Spotify that are called Jock Jams. And
Yeah.
some of my younger trivia players or like kids that I work with at our church are like,
Mhm.
"What's Jock Jams?" I'm like, "Child, just like that was I would say Jock Jams and the Now series
Yep.
are the two things that just encompassed 90s era music the best. And
Hmm.
I still can't believe that the Now series is still going on and they
Hmm.
still sell like the actual CDs of it, but it's hilarious because yes. Anyways, Jock Jams,
Yeah.
I will cede the floor to you about
Yes.
introducing Jock Jams and just what that meant to you.
So jock jams was just something that I feel like defines, and I'm talking about the OG jock jam ones, of course. Not
Mhm.
the if there's 50 of them now, however many, but that was just like you said, it was just the most exciting, pumped up, thrilling music. And I mean, I feel like that was just a CD that I had on rotation in my car nonstop. And it was just, I think it was also a way of like empowering teenagers to listen to their music. And it was, a great compilation of just pumped up great songs and just feel good summer. And then they had like some, remember Will Smith's Summertime, which was just like the anthem to the summer, and so many of those things. And then it makes me think of like MTV Spring Break Lake Havasu. Not that I ever attended, but saw it and just was like, what is happening? Oh, what was the other one? There used to be another one, Girls Gone Wild.
Yeah, oh yeah, that
I don't know if that was related to MTV, but just that whole concept of just kids 10, 5 to 10 years older than me, teenagers, high schoolers, or college kids that were just going crazy. And imagine now with social media and everyone having a smartphone, none of that could exist. Thank
no,
God.
absolutely
But
not. Yeah.
but so anyway, speaking of evolution, it went from the fabricated CDs, mixed CDs that you could order from an infomercial to then when I was, in the late 90s when I was in college and getting ready to graduate college, all of these streaming services started like Napster and whatever the other one was, whose name I don't remember. Do you remember the other one? There was another one.
There's a lot of different ones. There
Yeah.
was like a Napster, there was a LimeWire, there was
Okay.
a
I don't remember what the other one was called.
I don't remember what the other big one
Right.
was called, but I definitely remember Napster because
Yeah.
they were the first
Yeah.
and they were the ones that changed the music industry
Yeah.
for, I wouldn't even say for better or worse, they just changed it.
They
And
evolved it, exactly, they
yeah.
changed it, yeah, and I feel like every one of us had a friend that knew how to do it, and I would just say to my friend, "Here's a list of the songs I would like, could you make me this CD?" And I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
know, how much work it involved, what it involved. He just would
Mhm.
show up and give me the CD. And he is, in fact, the friend who I named that mixtape for, who is my good friend. But
Nice.
he was just a good guy that, he was just a good computer. He was a guy that was good with computers, so he knew what he was doing. And I have no idea, how he did it, but he did it.
When I was old enough to start making mix CDs, I was that guy. I was the
Mm-hmm.
guy that, hey, I've got a collection of MP3s, and I didn't have Napster at the
Mm-hmm.
time because my mom was like, "No,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. And it's my computer. I'm not going to allow you to do that." I'm like,
Yeah.
fine. But there were ways that you could get songs from other websites. I had a couple other ways that you could download an MP3 from a website, and sometimes it would be just fine. Sometimes it's like clearly this was from the radio and you just
Right.
uploaded it. And then sometimes you open the file and it's just a picture. I'm like, what what the hell is this?
And I feel like
But
everybody always felt they were one step away from the
mhm,
FBI knocking down their door, right?
exactly.
Which probably
But
made it kind of exciting.
But then also there eventually came a point where if I wanted to put more music on and have like this giant MP3 collection, which that was like the next fashionable thing for people is to have this giant MP3 playlist. You take a CD, whether it's a CD you get from home, a CD you borrow from friends, or a CD you get from the library, and you just take all the tracks and you download them to your computer. And I always thought that that was super fascinating that I could do that because then I can pick and choose what
Yep.
songs that I want to listen to, and the rest of them either get put in a folder to never be listened to ever again, or I just would delete them and be like, you know
Yep.
what? Like, I'm never going to listen to these songs again. That's fine.
Yep.
Until someone would come up to me and said, hey, I would like all of these songs on a playlist. Could you potentially put it
Hmm.
together? And you look at the list and you're like, crap, I just deleted a bunch of these. So
Yep.
I just got to figure out the best way to
Yep.
go about getting it.
And I feel like you would do that while you heard
Oh, God.
"Welcome to America Online," and then you would talk to your friends on AIM, and you would be listening to your music as you're
Mhm.
talking on, instant messenger, and you'd be like, "I'm the height of technology right now."
Yes, I very much feel that way. There's a new movie that came out. It's called Dee Dee, and they do a lot of it's takes place during that time frame, and
Yeah.
the main means of communication is AIM. And the sound when you get a
The
message, I
modem.
was like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You've got mail.
the
Yeah.
the modem sound and all of that, it still grates me to this day anytime I hear that, and how you weren't able to get a phone call. So like if you were on for an hour, you would get a bunch of voicemails, and then your parents or your brother or sister would get pissed. But for AIM, it was just the noise that you get that when you get a
Mhm.
message,
Mhm.
and it just brought me back. And I'm gonna be vulnerable for you for a second. I was watching it. My daughter came in, and I kind of cried a little bit. I teared
Yeah.
up because it was like it brought back memories. And my daughter was like, "Why are you crying? Like you don't get it. This
Yeah.
is just such a big part of my life
Yeah.
because." It was just the
Yes.
main way. There was a sense of independence. There was a sense of I am on the cutting edge of technology because I can communicate with my friends in just a
And
text form.
strangers.
Exactly.
Yes.
I can't forget about that part.
Yes, and globalization, right? That to you as a teenager sitting in your suburban house or wherever you were, your computer was connected to the world. And
Mhm.
oh, my friend gave me your instant message name. I'm in New Jersey. What's up? You're hot. And you're like, well, okay, you're hot
Oh,
too. Let's
cool.
meet up before the Internet Safety Act became something we had to talk about, right? And
Exactly.
just I mean, and I'll be vulnerable with you for a moment and let you know that I still use my AOL account and I get made fun of constantly. And when I hear you've got mail, it just makes me smile. And not in a
Mhm.
Meg Ryan way, just in a feeds my soul way.
Going back to one other thing when it comes to CDs as well.
Okay.
So the other thing with CDs that I don't think it's as popular as it is, I don't think it's as popular now as it was back then. But the main type of CD that I also listen to a lot is the movie soundtrack because movie soundtracks
Oh,
were not only a great way to get a variety of different types of music, but also you got back in the 90s, the movie soundtrack was also a great way to listen to a song that wasn't on the album and that was made specifically for the movie. So I look back
Yes.
at certain movies where the soundtrack was definitely a thing. So I'm looking at Disney, for example. Lots of Disney movies in the 90s had banging soundtracks, but you get
Yes.
certain other movie soundtracks and then you get the like main theme song that like plays on the radio a lot and you're like, this is a great song, but I don't understand how this matches up with the movie, I guess.
Yep.
So one example of that is I've never understood why the song I Don't Want to Miss a Thing is on the Armageddon soundtrack. Like it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make any sense why it's there. Or the song Kiss from a Rose in
Mm-hmm.
Batman Forever. Like
Mm-hmm.
none
Great
of this
example.
connects.
Yep.
But it doesn't change the fact they're they're awesome songs. They
Mm-hmm.
had outstanding music videos and they were just fun events. And
Yeah.
you mentioned those infomercials where you would order the songs. I'll also give a shout out to Columbia House, who
Yes. Oh my God. For 2 cents, you could have 15 CDs and one
ex
delivered every month to your door.
and then you do this, you get the stamps and then you put them on, and then oh, Columbia House was where it was at because you would do that with CDs and you would pick and choose, and then eventually evolved like you could do the same thing with movies. We'll start with the
Yes.
VHS tapes
Oh
first,
my
and then
God.
you could eventually do the DVDs. But I will also give a shout out to Columbia House because even
Yes.
my mom was like, "We are not ordering stuff from." I'm like,
Everyone mom said that. Yes.
I'm like, why? This seems like such a good deal. But if anything, for me, it was always fun just to take a look and see what are the things that you was available on Columbia House.
Yes.
It's also kind of like how back in the day when you leafed through a catalog, like
I was, yeah. Yeah.
an
It's the
actual catalog.
tangible and mail arriving for a child. That
Yeah,
was huge. I
that
I
was
couldn't agree with you more. I have to say my favorite soundtrack of all time is the Reality Bites soundtrack, which I think
such
is the best soundtrack.
mhm,
And I listened to a podcast recently about, I think Lisa Loeb. They
mhm.
were interviewing Lisa Loeb, and she talked so much about that movie. And I don't remember if she was talking about, or I don't remember if it was Ben Stiller or Lisa Loeb, but one of them was talking, both of them were guests on this podcast, and they were talking about how so much of that music almost didn't make it into the movie. And so much of the movie was about the music. And it was just so intricate and how they played on each other. And I mean, that soundtrack to this day, I think is one of the absolute bests.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because the two songs that you mentioned, I remember they're so ingrained with a connection to the movies that you mentioned them with. And I was thinking, the only thing I could think of was I wonder if they were in the credits and you just didn't watch the credits because they didn't have end scenes at that point, right?
Yep.
And maybe they were there. But I remember also there, I remember buying soundtracks because I loved a song and that song wasn't on the soundtrack. Or buying soundtracks and songs like you mentioned were on the soundtrack but weren't in the movie. And you're just like, all right, I guess I bought it for the one song I like. Maybe I should have bought a single, but I
Yep.
never, yeah. But I think music and movies are so intertwined. And I feel like today it's such a marketing machine for so much of the
Yep.
music that's in movies that there's not that like visceral response to that Aerosmith song where I still remember where I was sitting there, or like the Forrest Gump soundtrack and like
Mhm.
songs that you just, it's like the place and the time you can say exactly where you were. And it's just, I mean, also even talk about movies. Like my kids, we go see movies all the time and I buy them ahead of time on my app. And we walk in 5 minutes before the movie and sit in F6, F7, F8, which I pre bought. And then the movie starts, and I've explained to them, you used to have to go to the movie theater, go a while before the movie started, buy the ticket, hope it wasn't sold out, wait in line before the movie theater, the actual theater opens, go into that theater, try to get the
Make a
seats.
sprint for the
Right.
seats. Yep.
Sprint for the seats. And like if your seats, because my son, we saw a movie a couple over December break, and he's like, why do we never sit in the front row of a movie theater? And I'm like, you never sit in the front row. And he's like, then why is it there? I'm like, it's for the people that come in late. He's like, but who comes in late? You buy the tickets. I'm like, oh my boy, everyone had that
If
neck problem and they
If
never were late again.
if only you knew
Yeah.
where if you arrive late to a movie theater and the only seats available were in the front seat, then you
Mhm.
have to ask yourself the question, do I even want to see this movie at this time, or do I have to go back to the box office and say, can I get tickets to the next one? And then they
Mhm.
begrudgingly are like, fine. And
Yeah.
then you just have to do the exchange that way because
And then you would sit there for hours and you would call your parents and they would say, "Will you accept a collect call from, I'm going to the next movie, pick me up at 8."
dropped a collect call reference as well. My God, you just good times with that because I just talked about this recently because when my we went to Australia and New Zealand for a trip because my wife's from New Zealand, and one of the things that we talked about a little bit was I wanted my daughter to see a payphone because
Okay.
she's just like, what is this? What do I do with this? And she's like, is that why when you're talking to me on a phone, you do this as opposed to what kids do now, which is this, because
Yeah.
that's how they all hold a phone now.
Mhm.
And I told her that yes, back in the day, we always had to carry a little bit of change with us if we need to make a call in case of emergency. And we had to memorize the phone number because none of
Mhm.
this type in mom, hit send, and then call it a day. No, I had to memorize, or my mom would laminate a little index card with all of the important phone numbers on there for emergency contacts.
Mhm.
So she said, what if you don't have any money or if you run out of money? And that's when my wife swoops in and was like, well, that's why 1-800 collect is a thing. She's like, what is
Oh,
that? Which to this day, I never understood how they actually billed for 1-800 collect because they always said, do you accept the charges? And it's like, how do you accept like, do you just mail it and you just know it by phone number? It's possible, but it doesn't matter as well because it was always a good thing to have handy. It's like, hey, I don't have any change on me because carrying around Spain change is just a pain anyways.
yeah.
So I would just call 1-800 collect in a pinch, and then my mom would be like, why did you call me or what is going on? And it's like, I messed up something. Can you come pick me up in like an hour instead? And you're
Yeah.
like, fine. Yeah. Good stuff there. So the two movie soundtracks that kind of stand out to me, cause well, three rather. One was Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, and
Oh,
that to me was a lot of fun, mainly because my sister loved it, and she loved it because of Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, let's just call it
obviously.
what it is. But I also just appreciated it as well because I thought it was like a fun movie, and that soundtrack was amazing. But the other soundtrack for me, a little bit later on, was 10 Things I Hate About You. And
Oh, great movie.
it's great movie, great soundtrack. And looking back, it's like, did I did I secretly love Shakespeare stuff
Oh my God, that's true. There's a theme.
when I was younger? But
That's really funny.
yeah, those were two soundtracks
Yeah.
that I adore, and I still listen to them to this day in digital
Yeah.
form, but
Yep.
I still listen to both of them. So yeah, the movie soundtrack definitely more of a thing in the 80s and 90s, and specifically the theme song, which when you see the music video, it says I don't want to miss a thing, theme song from the movie Armageddon. And
Mm,
that you don't get that as often where you have a theme song, and
yeah.
it sucks because from like an if we're talking about the evolution of music specifically in the 80s and 90s, that's one thing that I do miss is that the
Yeah.
movie soundtrack theme song that was just part of the movie, and it was a huge marketing thing, and it's just a huge way just to continue to sell merchandise for it, and it sucks that we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, and it's funny because the movie that was out a couple years ago with Sydney Sweeney, I can't, and Glenn Powell, I don't remember the name of the movie, but Unwritten, which was a
Hmm.
90s song,
Yeah.
was such a big part of it that my daughter was singing all the time. And I was like, why do you know the song? And she's like, oh, it's from the movie. And I
Mhm.
was like, that's really funny. And then I saw the movie and they sing it throughout the movie. And then she was singing for New Year's Eve this year, 2024, when the ball dropped to 2025. And I said, this woman has a song that was famous 20 years ago. Do you think if you asked her 5 years ago that she would be performing live on whatever New Year's Eve show she's on, that she would be singing? It's just funny how so many of these songs, and like you were saying, the trends right now are going back to all these 80s and 90s, either time frame or remakes, which that's a whole other conversation we can have.
Right.
But it's just interesting that that's really what's resonating with people, the music from back then, even if the movie is taking place in current day or taking place back then. But I mean, I just think that that's so, the music in the movies, it's just, it's incredible. And all the John Hughes movies and all, the Breakfast Club
Mhm.
If You Leave and all those songs that just make you think 16 Candles. If you think about, the bus moving and Jake Ryan standing there on his Porsche and the song that comes out and everyone got chills. And
Mhm.
it's just incredible. But I do want to keep talking just about the evolution as much as I could talk about this for forever, because I think a big turning point was in 2010, which is much farther away from the 80s and the 90s than, initially we discussed. But, at that point, actually 2005, I should say, we got an iPod as a wedding present. And I was like, wow, so this small thing takes the place of my whole Case Logic. Okay. And then when we had our daughter in 2010, my husband's group of friends said, "We want to get you a present. What can we get you?" And I said, "Honestly, I would like an iPod just for her room where I can have just kids' music and make just white noise sounds and all of these things." And I said, "I just want to have something dedicated just to her music in her room there." And I put it on my, what are those? What was the brand called where it's like you stuck it in the thing and then it had the
Oh,
iHome.
iHomes, yes,
So we had
exactly.
one of those in the kitchen, one of those in her room, and I just remember feeling that that was such a great present because I was able to put all of my iTunes music for kids on that. But I just remember thinking, and I have over here too as a visual, my Case Logic, my Logic, yes, which
Okay,
has,
all right. Hold on.
oh,
Before
weighs
you
more
go
than
on
I
any
do.
further,
Yes.
how many CDs can you get in that Case Logic?
Well, so I have front and back and multiples. So
Oh,
let's see.
jeez.
The index or the table of contents has a slot for 25, but I'm sorry, 25 pages. Each of those pages has 4 on them. But and this also has my college address of my freshman year in college, I should mention. But I mean, I have so many. I have, let's see, 25 pages front and back. So that's 50 pages. Each of those is 4 CDs. And then some of them I have shoved in more. So I don't even know. But even so, a small, tiny iPod could fit thousands and thousands. And I just remember that blew my mind, right?
Yeah, yep. I was the same way because the first couple MP3 players, even taking Microsoft's failed Zune experience because I had a Zune because it was cheaper, and it was a giant pain to figure out how to get the music on the Zune instead. But the iPod, what was so nice about the iPod is that you could arrange the music in like interesting ways. You couldn't make a playlist per se. It was still a little bit on the complicated side because you just dump all the music on there. And I remember when the first iteration of the iPod, it was like the screen was very basic. It wasn't in color or anything like that. And the only options were to skip or to go ahead and put a song on repeat and shuffle. That's
Hmm.
really it. Then various other versions of the iPod, they had color, and then when they started to have more apps and they had touchscreens, that's when like
Mm,
okay, the appeal of the
yep.
iPod wasn't as fun. But I do remember the first iPod I got and how it was like 250 gigabytes of
Hmm.
megabytes or gig, I don't know, but you could
Yeah.
put a ton of
Yeah.
music on there.
Yeah.
And these old Case Logics where I had them mainly for movies at
Hmm.
the time, but the
Sure.
ones that I had for CDs is like, wow, I can just replace all of this music with this tiny device that has all the different types of music out there.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I remember it blew my mind. And then I remember one time I was at work and this must have been 2005 or 6 and one of my like technology forward coworkers said, "You know that if you need to work from home, you could transfer data on the iPod." And I was like, "What?"
What?
And he's like, "It's basically like, like a thumb drive, but kind of it has the ability to transfer." And I was like, I my brain doesn't even comprehend that. It's just for my music. Thank you. But what I find interesting, and moving on from iPods, obviously became all of these streaming services, I have consistently listened to the same things and just transferred them from place to place. I think U2 Greatest Hits, B-Sides, one of the best CDs in the world with Beautiful Thing. What's the song? What's
Beautiful Day.
No, the one that he wrote about his wife. I don't know, fell out of my head. But that one, that was, I think that was the new song on the Greatest Hits CD or something like that. That was
Hmm.
amazing. Cyndi Lauper, 12 Deadly Sins, one of my favorites, Reality Bites soundtrack, always. Counting Crows, August and Everything After. And I
Hmm.
mean, these are just CDs that come or music that goes from one to the other, right? Like a Virgin or Immaculate Collection, all of these that just the best.
Hmm.
And no matter how I listen to them, and Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, I mean, I feel like when that
Iconic.
came
Yeah.
out, it's like just the world stopped for every girl. And I remember opening the sunroof and blasting it and leaving high school and feeling like empowered and that someone heard my anger as like a scorned teenager. And it's incredible that when you get older, when all of the information behind the scenes about some of these songs unfolds and you're like, wait, you're singing about the guy from Full House? Is that true?
Oh,
And I'm trying to
yes.
see. And so I feel like somewhere between the iPod and streaming lied the iPhone music, which
Hmm.
I have, and I've slowly taken things off. But Legend, Bob Marley, one of my favorites. In Your Eyes by Debbie Gibson, one of my favorites. And I'm trying to see. And there was the Beatles one, which was a good CD, which was an 80s music, but the greatest hits came out in the 80s. And it's funny too, because I know we spoke before we started recording about My So-Called Life, which obviously was a TV show, not a show about music. But that show had such a phenomenal soundtrack. The scene with Violent Femmes where she's, running, jumping on top of her bed and having her like teenage flip out moment. But to me, the song that by far, I feel like there is no way that I can listen to the song without smiling. And it just is every bit of teen angst in the world is the song by Buffalo Tom, which is, I'm trying to see, I don't even know what the name of the song is, but the band is Buffalo Tom. And Jordan Catalano sang the song in an episode where Angela was trying to figure out if he had a crush on her. And it was every single girl, to me at least, I felt that every single teenage girl in America who had a crush on someone felt that moment. And this song where he looks at her, and I get chills now even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I was in a bad mood yesterday, and I have that song on my phone. And I listened to it, and I thought to myself, I can't not smile and get chills just listening to the song. And I don't even know if there's more than 50 people in the world that know what this song is. But,
Mhm.
and I don't know if it existed anywhere ever outside of this one show that had one season in 1994. But
Mhm.
that song to me is just everything. And yeah,
Well, it's just so funny that you mentioned because we talked a lot about the movie soundtrack
yeah,
kind of being this
what that
pinnacle,
was.
but
Yeah.
now also the TV show or TV show compilations of all the songs from the music. And what I think about, in addition to like the MTV shows that had outstanding soundtracks on them, I think of the CW or the WB as it was called, because shows like Dawson's Creek and shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer
Yep.
had great music to it. But I remember the show Smallville. The
Yeah.
show
Oh my God.
Smallville.
I love that. That with me. Oh, yes, 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 yes,
So
yes.
the show Smallville had the talent mix where they would have these CDs of all of the different songs that would come out in the show. And it was like,
Yes.
oh,
My
good
God.
for you guys. Like that was always awesome when
Oh
when
my
those
God.
kind of came out. And those became more of a thing throughout the course of like the 2000s in particular, where shows like Smallville, shows like Scrubs had music that came out, music from the show Scrubs. And then when you watch the DVD of them, then the music was different.
Yes.
But then when they go on streaming services, it's like this isn't the same music. Oh, it's because you didn't have the rights
So,
to
yes.
stream to play some
So
of
I
these
have to
songs.
tell you two things that I like totally freaks me out that you said that. So first of all, I looked it up and the song that I'm talking about from Buffalo Tom, it was called Soda Jerk. And this
Mhm.
is the first time I ever learned the name of it. Everyone I think thinks it's called Late at Night, but let's see. It was in fact called Soda Jerk, which this is the first time I'm hearing this. But
Mm.
it's funny that you say that because yesterday I was having this exact conversation with someone and he was saying how we were talking about the show Beverly Hills 90210, obviously an iconic 90s TV show. And
Mhm.
he was saying how now there is like a 24-hour 90210 streaming channel, which I find funny.
Really?
He
Okay.
said, "There is different music." And I said,
Yeah.
"I remember years ago when it wasn't necessarily streaming, but there was like a cable channel that had 90210 on several times throughout the day. And I got a text from a friend of mine, and he was like, "What is going on? Brenda and Dylan are breaking up, and Losing My Religion is not playing in the background." And I said, "Shows like that." And this became a conversation with like Shanice and I Love Your Smile and Jeremy Jordan and all of these songs that were so ingrained in these shows that again were so part of the 90s, but now that they're either streaming or you're watching them however, they're not there. And he said, and this was correct, and I was laughing. He goes, "I'm gonna guess, knowing you, that you have the box set of 90210 DVDs." And I'm like, "Obviously." And
Mhm.
so he's like, "And on those, I bet you have that music." And I was like, "Yeah."
Yep.
And it's just funny that like Losing My Religion in that moment in his, vintage Porsche while they're sitting at the beach and they're breaking up. Like that is one of the most like standout moments of that whole series, which like engulfed the 90s, right?
Mhm.
And to hear that moment with a different song in the back, or to see that moment and hear a different song in the background, just feels like I would be so mad. I would be so angry. But Smallville, you brought up, and Smallville is a show that my husband and I used to watch when it was on, once a week. And the music, I remember, I was always amazed. And there was a song, and I was trying to look it up, and I wanted to say it was the James Blunt "You're Beautiful" song. There was this moment between Lana and Superman where I don't remember what the name of the song was, and it wasn't "You're Beautiful." It was the other song that sounds like that, I think. Or maybe it was that, but it was just the song where they like finally broke up and she was walking away and he was looking at her and like chills. It's like they found the most perfect music to illustrate the feelings in the moment. And it was amazing. And I want to say also, it's funny that you brought up the OC because last night we were listening to, I don't know if it was some sort of shuffle or something, but I don't know what the name of the song is, but the one something about California came up. I'm not going to sing it. And my daughter goes, "For some reason, the song makes me think of the OC." She said, excuse me, she's 14. She was born in 2010, but it made her think of the OC, which she watched a couple years ago. And she's like, "I don't know if this was the theme song, but it makes me think of the theme song. And so it makes me think of this." And I was like, damn, that was a cool thing for you to say, child.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Because Phantom Planets, California, which is the
Yeah.
OC theme song. Yeah, I have a playlist of songs that were like actually songs
Yeah.
from TV shows, and there's the theme song. And I occasionally play it at trivia, and people are like, "Oh, this was great." Just a great way to remember some of those songs. But the I do have a specific playlist of like these are songs that I got because I watched the show
Yeah.
Smallville. So it's
Yeah.
filled with
Oh,
a
amazing.
lot of it's filled with a bunch of songs by Lifehouse. There is a
Yes.
version, there's a version of going back to Cyndi Lauper. There's a
Hmm.
version of Time After Time, which is a slowed down version that they play at a funeral in season 1 of Smallville. And look, I think Time After Time is a pun intended timeless song. It's just
100%.
amazing.
In
And
any
the
iteration of it.
in
Yes.
any iteration. And there has been an influx of acoustic slowed down versions of Time After Time that I adore. And like I wouldn't have gotten that version if it wasn't for Smallville. And I gotta give shout outs, and I gotta give a lot of credence to that because it embodied a lot of great music at the time. Like the first time I discovered Avril Lavigne
Mm.
was because of Smallville. I discovered Maroon 5 because of Smallville.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have gotten that because around this time frame as well, I wasn't listening to the radio a lot. I was
Mm.
just in my own
Yeah.
head or using mixed CDs as the way that, like, hey, I just
Yeah.
want to curate
Mhm.
specifically that I want to talk about or I wanted to listen to. So TV shows became a like form of radio
Mhm.
for me
Mhm.
because that is the way that I would discover new
Yeah.
artists. Because movie soundtracks at the time, they were starting to become less common and more focused
More
specifically
vehicles. Yeah.
on just scores. That's
Mhm.
it. Like the movie theme song was definitely like 70s, 80s, 90s
Mhm.
type of thing. And but when now that TV has definitely become a thing where I get a lot of my music taste now from TV. And that's
Yeah.
another evolution of just how how we consume music because I never would have thought that a lot of songs that I like and listen to come from TV shows because
Yeah,
I I didn't really like love watching TV growing up, but now I
yeah,
watch a lot of TV because
yeah,
the websites that I write for when it comes to reviews, everybody wants to review movies. Nobody wants to review TV because it's a
yeah,
huge time commitment.
yeah.
But to me, one of the fun things about watching TV is just discovering new types of music now.
Yeah.
And that's
And
always a
it's
lot of
funny.
fun.
I Googled I'm just looking at songs from Smallville because until you said it, it's funny because I've been saying to my boys how they would like the show because my husband's obsessed with Superman. We're a big Superman house here. But I forgot how impactful the music was until you said that. And I'm thinking as you're talking, even the opening theme song had such a like an amazing like it was getting you ready, like it was warming you up for this incredible show. And it's just so funny that you're saying this. And I'm looking now because it's yeah, the music. And every week I remember it would end and I would just be like, whoa, just it's incredible. And I wonder if that exists today because also I think that you know, at that time, obviously there was cable, but we were talking about MTV. And when I first had MTV, I had a cable box that was this big with 30 channels. And 30 channels to me was like the world. And I remember coming home from school one day and my mom's like, we got cable. And it was corded, right? And it was a box the size of a shoebox. And then you had 30 choices and you thought that that was the best. And then, it evolved to more channels and now there's like it's like television is so fraction that I don't know if even the networks still have shows where it pulls people like Smallville and maybe CW because it's like geared towards kids, or maybe would it be like oh my god, what's the show, it just fell out of my head, Outer Banks. Like Outer Banks, I feel like maybe you could say as like the Smallville of today, or Vampire Diaries, which was not even, it's not even current, but like Pretty Little Liars. These are shows that my teenage daughter is now watching, and I feel like are those the closest we have to a show like Smallville or to that like, YA kind of
Mhm.
TV equivalent. Because the truth is, I think that when you're watching a TV show and you want someone to have a reaction, an emotional reaction or a physical reaction to the music, who is that audience? It's probably teenagers, not like a 55-year-old man or something, or not to say that a 55-year-old man can't like music, but
Right. No,
right?
I
I
get what you're
feel
saying. Yeah.
right? I feel like a teenager is the person that is like open and willing to learn. But it's just
Mhm.
funny how, like you said, the whole consumption of music is so different now that somebody says, I want to hear this song play. And that kind of randomization of learning what you don't already know, it's a very controlled environment. And it's just a shame now that the serendipitous way of hearing these new songs don't happen.
Yep. And the closest thing that we do have to that now, there's a lot of show on Netflix that have like music compilations, and the next step of that is there are curated playlists on Spotify
Mhm,
and Apple to this. And the show, I think the show that has come like there's two shows in particular where I know that they have compilation playlists on Spotify, and those two shows are Wednesday, which again,
mm,
that's a show that has a very specific target audience
mhm,
that looks for high school age girls in
mhm,
particular that are looking for a bunch of different music. But the show in particular that kind of I think gears it a little towards like my age a little
mhm.
bit because it is harkening back to those songs from the 80s is Peacemaker. On
I don't know what that is.
Peacemaker is a DC, it's a DC show. It stars
Okay.
John Cena, and it
Okay.
is a lot of he makes it known 80s heavy metal and 80s hair bands
Okay.
are what he usually listens to. So
Okay.
they've got a playlist because the theme song is I can't remember who it is, but it is 80s metal through and through.
Wow.
And a lot of the songs that they play are 80s metal. So
Yeah. That's
James
amazing.
James Gunn knows his audience and he knows that like guys like me are like, this
Yeah.
is something comforting
Yeah.
about this. And then Stranger Things also is kind of in that similar boat because Stranger Things takes place in the 80s and they're specifically gearing the music to have a lot of these songs. So I think like Thriller became like Thriller's always a big song, especially
Yeah.
at Halloween, but
Mm.
they had Thriller be a song that got, found a new life because it appeared on a
Wow.
trailer for Stranger Things.
Oh, that's so
Um,
interesting.
Running Up That Hill became a huge
Mm-hmm.
song because of that episode of Stranger Things.
And I
Metallica,
didn't know that was an '80s song because I don't watch the show. My family watches it. It's not
yeah,
like my type of show. But that song came out and then I heard it and they were saying I on the radio and they were talking about it being an '80s like resurgence. And I'm like, that song's from the '80s. I don't remember it from then and I didn't know it from now, but that's funny.
yeah, and then there's a song from Metallica that
Mhm.
became really big from that, and then yeah, it's just that is the way that a lot of people are discovering some of their older music right now is through TV shows and specifically on
Yeah,
streaming services now. So I got to give them a little bit of credit for that because
absolutely.
and then also, I was watching, this actually happened last night because I was editing a podcast and I needed something in the background. And I was like, I can't watch something that I have to pay attention to
Yep.
because I'm
You need
multitasking.
white noise. Yeah.
So I picked Deadpool and Wolverine, and
Hmm.
my daughter, my oldest, came in and was like, "What are you watching right now?" It's like, "Can you come to bed?" And they were playing Like a Prayer by Madonna. And
Ah.
first of all, Like a Prayer is an all-time song for
Yeah.
me. It is one of those songs that if it's back in the day when it was on the radio, you would blast it. I admit I sang it once for karaoke to get a girl's phone number, and it
Did it work?
worked.
Wife?
It no, it is not my wife. It was just some random girl that
Yeah.
I met in college, and it was one of those things where I stopped what I was doing just so I could listen to the music.
That's a
The
song where you sit on your driveway and wait for it to end before you go into your house.
yes, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
But she's like, I like this song. This is catchy. I'm like,
Mhm.
right, right.
Right? You are smart. You know things more than
You,
just, the songs that are out today. Exactly. Yep.
yeah. So yeah, just
That's great.
I know for me, my musical taste has evolved, and it's thanks a lot in large part nowadays to movies and specifically TV shows.
Yeah.
Um,
Two things I just want to say before you say your next point based on what you were saying. So Stranger Things, which again I admit I don't watch, Winona Ryder is in it, who
mhm.
obviously is an icon of that decade, those decades. And in addition to making my kids like and listen to 80s and 90s music, we also make sure they watch 80s and 90s movies. So one of my kids said something the other day, and I'm like, "Oh, I should show you guys Lucas." So we watched Lucas last week, and Winona Ryder, who looks like a 14-year-old boy, is in that movie. And they're like, "That's the mom from Stranger Things, but she's old now." And I'm like, "Yeah, this was 40 years ago," which I think is so funny. And I feel like that's just the great tie between, besides it taking place in that decade, they have icons from that generation in the thing to kind of talk to the parents but get the kids interested. And the other thing I just wanted to add is I feel like I did not mention before when I gave you my list of my like stuck on an island CDs, but George Michael Faith. And I need to
Mm.
just include that one. And when we talk about just like, the reaction that your body has when they hear the first few notes, I mean, the opening, organ of Faith, I think is something that is just up there with the best of the best.
So I think this is a good segue to talk about this playlist that you
Okay.
sent me because
Yes.
I'm taking a look at this playlist right now, and I have lots of check marks here, which means these are songs that I've either favorited or songs that I have kind of earmarked as
Hmm.
ones that are on other playlists or just ones that I just adore. So
Yeah.
there's there's a couple on here, and if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind linking this to the episode as well, just for other people to discover. But the first song that kind of stands out to me is Slide by the Goo Goo Dolls, which
Yep.
is the first song, because for me, Dizzy Up the Girl was one of those albums that I got it specifically because of the song Iris, which is also on the City of Angels soundtrack, which is an interesting movie to say the least,
Mhm.
but it was a huge part of that soundtrack. And it also has had a resurgence recently because of
Wow.
Deadpool and Wolverine. So, but Dizzy Up the Girl was one of those albums that I got for a very specific thing. And thankfully, I listened to that album a lot because it had a lot of great songs on there. Not just radio songs, but just a lot of other ones that didn't make it to the radio as well. So
So I would actually like to tell you the story of this playlist, and then I think it would be amazing if you shared it. So if you would let me, I think that would be kind of cool. And I touched on this a little bit with you, but I think it's such a fun story. So I feel like now when you go out to eat or you go somewhere, it's music of today, you don't pay too much attention. My middle son has been dying to try a seafood boil or whatever it's called, where they bring you all kinds of shellfish and it's boiled in a pot and it's messy and it was a whole to do. Anyway, we're sitting there. He's loving this. I'm just in pain because I'm cracking all these things and handing it to him. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, my God, every song that comes on is a song that was on one of my CDs when I was younger. And I'm talking random stuff from Drew Barrymore's, from Ever After, from, Never Been Kissed soundtrack that like there's 10 people that might know what that song is. And I turned to my waitress, who was like a fetus, and I said to her, what are you listening to? And she's like, oh, my manager made the soundtrack. I'm like, I need you to send your manager over because this is the best soundtrack I've ever heard in my life. And as a side note, randomly, we had never been to this restaurant before, and it's in our local mall. It's not like a fancy restaurant. When we first sat down before we ordered, this guy comes over to us and says, it's Thursday. Thursday is bingo. Would you like to play bingo? And we're like, well, how much is it? What's the story? He goes, it's free. It's just to like make dinner more fun. And I'm like, I'm down for bingo. But because of that, it drew out the night so long because obviously once you start playing bingo, you got to keep playing bingo. So we finished eating, but we sat there for so much longer because we were so into bingo. And every song, hit after hit after hit, like on my list, like you just said, so many check marks, every single song. But it was such a variety and it was so obscure, like songs from like Down to You and like these movies that were so important to me. But you're laughing because who talks about Down to You, right? Oh
not a
my
lot of
God.
people. Yeah.
Right. And so I go over at the end of the night and I find the manager who's about my age. And I said to her, I know this is so random, but this is the best soundtrack I've ever heard. And I would love it if you could share it with me. Is this like a playlist or something? And she goes, it's on Spotify. I'll send it to you. And I said to her, I cannot tell you enough how this is just like the most incredible like curation of songs from my like youth and today and this and that. And so I was so excited when you and I started talking and I sent it to you and you had that same reaction. And I feel like I don't even know her name and I don't even know how to like give her credit, but like the manager of Hook and Reel in Hicksville, Long Island gets all the props from me for making this soundtrack.
Well, the person who's tagged on this,
Yeah.
who created it, DJ Garnett.
Okay.
That's who's tagged in it. So maybe that's it, but
Yeah, I don't
yeah,
even know.
but this playlist is just filled with such a good variety
Yeah.
of different songs from the last like 40 years or so.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the way that it's arranged, it's really good as well because I'm I'm looking at some of these songs as well, and these are ones that are just all-timers for me. So like
Oh,
here's another example of a song that got a little bit of a second life because of a TV show recently, and that is Easy Lover by
mhm.
Phil Collins.
Yeah.
This is a song that was forgotten to time to me, and it's one that I was like, "Oh, I remember this song," but it recently appeared on an episode of Ted Lasso,
Ah,
and the reason why is because Ted Lasso has this philosophy is that if you cannot get yourself ready and dressed in the same time that it takes to listen to the song Easy Lover, you're doing it wrong.
oh, that's
And
funny.
so he says that, and then in an episode, like a couple episodes later, it just you see him getting dressed and he's just jamming out to Easy Lover. And I was like, that's right. I love this song. I
I'm on
cannot.
board. Sign me up. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean, like
absolutely.
Wonderwall. I mean, what is just better? And Hold On by Wilson Phillips. And, Tears for Fears, something you said earlier made me think of them. There was an article that came out a couple years ago about Tears for Fears in the newspaper. And they were talking about how they don't want to be pigeonholed as like an older band and they want people to know them as musicians and appreciate them for their new stuff. And I was like, okay.
Oh, okay. You keep telling yourself that,
Yeah.
guy.
But it
So,
was so interesting because the whole focus of this article was like, we don't want people to come out and think that. We want, you to hear us. Sweetest Thing, by the way, is the song I was trying to think about, the U2 song.
Oh, okay,
The
got it.
sweetest thing. I don't know if that's what I said. That is on this playlist. I
Mm.
mean, it's just one after one, and even Hey Ya, and Hey Ya, which is not the most romantic song at the time of our wedding in 2005. We were both so obsessed with it that we said that was our second wedding song. We had a romantic song, and then we all broke out into dancing to Hey Ya.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned Hey Ya, and I love the song Hey Ya. It's really
Mhm.
good. But there was an episode of Scrubs that
Yes.
played a slowed down acoustic version of Hey Ya. And I was like, wow, this is actually quite lovely and quite
Yeah.
beautiful. Because look, I hate to say it, you're not listening to that song for the lyrics. You're listening to it to the beat and because it's it also has a kick-ass music video as
Yeah.
well. But when you actually like listen to the lyrics of it, it's like, oh, this is actually saying a lot more than I thought, and I would not have gotten that if it wasn't for an episode of Scrubs. So
Yeah.
shout out to them for
Yeah.
that.
Scrubs used to have a great soundtrack, but it's funny because just kind of saying going along with what you were saying before and how we were talking about like the old VH1 unplugged, until you hear a song in an acoustic version, you're like, I didn't know what the words were, and wow, that's what the song is about. Yeah.
Well, like one other song that's like I have a lot of songs that's like I've got a green check next to it. All That She Wants by Ace of Base, which generally when people think of Ace of Base, they think The Sign. And rightfully
Mm-hmm.
so, because The
Mm-hmm.
Sign is a fantastic song. All That She Wants is the first Ace of Base song that I ever heard, with
Mm.
specifically that album, because my cousin, he picked me up from home one day to take me and my sister to the movies, listening to this on his Discman
Love
that
it.
was connected to his car, and we were listening to Ace of Base, All That She Wants, and that was great stuff. But then you also have some songs on here that it's because it's got a wide variety of
Mm-hmm.
different artists as well. And one on here, Christina Aguilera, Come On Over Baby, which most people are like, what song is that? But that first Christina Aguilera album that had Genie in a Bottle and What a
Mm-hmm.
Girl Wants, this was a song that was on there that it gets you moving. It's a great song. It's got a fun music video, and not a lot of people remember because they always think of those other two songs first.
Yeah. And you know what's on here that I'm seeing now? And to add it to our Smallville conversation, Angels by Robbie Williams. I mean, that song is chills. That song to me, when I think about it, it makes me think of whatever episode that was of Smallville, which I don't even remember the episode, but I just remember the arc of that song and watching that show and just being like, my God, the musical director of this show is a god. Like, this is amazing.
Music director for that show and like the CW shows, just they know their audience and they just know that really well.
Yeah.
Any other songs on this playlist that you want to single out as ones that you're like obviously all the songs on this playlist are fantastic, but
I mean, it's funny, the Tina Turner song "Better Be Good to Me," which I never really knew before. When we saw the movie If last year, that song was very prominently featured, and I was like, "I don't even know what this is, but this is a great song." And it's like it has kind of like a good, you know, sound to it. I mean, Pet Shop Boys, I love Pet Shop Boys. You know, that also brings me back to that jukebox when I was in camp trying to see
oh, going back to
Rewind from the Cardigans. That's the song that makes me think of those of Never Been Kissed, which
mhm.
when I used to watch it, I thought it was the greatest movie. And then when I watched it as a parent, I was like, oh, this
Oh,
movie
this
is not okay.
yes,
Right?
yes, very much
Oh.
so. So going back really quick to "You Better Be Good to Me" by Tina Turner.
Mm-hmm.
That's we watched it. We had the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but
Oh wow.
you know where I had so that song, Paul Rudd sang that song on Limp Sync Battle when
Okay.
it was on the Tonight Show.
Okay.
And that was one where I was like, what is this song? What is this? And
Right.
again, just going to show like the evolution of how we consume music. Lip Sync Battle has introduced like a lot of songs to individuals as well as a way to be like, oh, interesting. There's a lot of like interesting stuff that's kind of going on that are you're not sure where you can get some of the songs.
So I'm looking at this list and there's definitely some songs that really just resonate so much with me. So first of all, this is not from the 80s or 90s, but Night Changes by One Direction, I just think is an incredible song.
Mhm.
And Girl on Fire, obviously, Don't You Forget About Me, huge, but I totally forgot this. And when I heard it in the restaurant, I like stopped with the chills. Unpretty by TLC. And TLC just, oh my God, their CDs and their songs and that, waterfalls but like Unpretty, I feel like was just this like calling to every teenage girl that felt unpretty. And it was just the most beautiful song. And it had such an awesome like melody. And it was fast, but it wasn't. And it was just like, that song to me always just struck such a chord. And I took my daughter, like I was saying, how I'm educating her in all these songs. We saw TLC or the remaining TLC members the summer prior to this past summer. I guess it was summer of 2023 when there was another one of those 80s, 90s compilation at this Jones Beach amphitheater.
Mm.
But that song Unpretty, I feel like is just it just says so much.
So that's a great song. Great music video as well. TLC also had great music videos.
Great.
And it's interesting because one of the last times that I like really thought about like the impact that that song has was on an episode of Glee when
Mm,
they did a compilation of I Feel Pretty and Unpretty. And it was like, that's a great way to show the dichotomy of both those songs and how they both elicit different feelings, particularly in high schoolers.
yeah.
So
Absolutely. I
I'm
think
pretty,
Glee, I feel like we should almost talk about Glee, but that wasn't in those decades. But I feel like the mashups or even just the creating the mashup is for them. I mean, I remember the episode where Gwyneth Paltrow was on and she was singing on the stage to Umbrella and then she was doing the dance as the rain was coming down. And that was like one of the most incredible scenes I've ever seen on a TV show.
yep, I would have to agree with that. Yeah, Glee introduced a lot of songs to individuals as well who they weren't sure like where those songs came from, and you got to give them props because they repopularized the song "Don't Stop Believing" in a way
Hmm.
that just made it a little bit more palatable for kids today.
Yeah.
Even though anybody who was born around the same time that you and I were born, they know that song. It is a
Hmm.
song that they grew up on because Journey was a band that my dad had the CDs and the cassettes, and it was one that we listened to quite often.
Hmm.
And as somebody who's from the Chicagoland area, the Chicago White Sox tried to bogart that song because
Yeah.
when they won the 2005 World Series,
Hmm.
they played that song like born and raised in South Chicago. I'm like no, you can't do that to first of all, you can't do that to Journey, but you can't do
Yeah.
that to Detroit as well
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's their song. Leave it be.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, Sophie B. Hawkins is on this, which is just such an icon from that era. Natalie Imbruglia. I mean, that song was huge when that came out, right? I mean,
mhm.
Baby, I Love Your Way, which is also on the Reality Bite soundtrack. Faith, You Gotta Be. I mean, when I hear the song You Gotta Be, I feel like I'm a junior in college studying abroad and dancing to that song in clubs in Europe. And that's
Mhm.
just such a moment.
Yeah,
Groove is in the heart, even. I mean, come on.
yeah.
It's every single song got better and better. And honestly, like I'm sitting there eating dinner and I'm just thinking, I don't even care what I'm doing here. This whole entire evening, like, paid off because of the soundtrack.
This is a great compilation of just a lot of heavy hitters and just bangers that are just really great. And I'm so glad that you shared this with me because it's now just going to go in the rotation of songs that I can listen to anywhere and ones that I'm excited to share some of these songs with my daughter. Like my 7 year
Yeah.
old is old enough to appreciate some of the songs that are on here. Because like when we watch movies like Trolls, for
Mm-hmm.
example, Trolls for kids today, they think of a lot of those songs as like, hey, these are peppy pop
Mm-hmm.
songs. They don't realize they're based in real songs,
Yeah.
though. So, for example, my daughter, the first Trolls movie, there was a part where, like, have you ever seen the Trolls movies? Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
wasn't Time After Time in that also?
it was True Colors
True Colors.
by
Okay.
Cyndi
Sorry.
Lauper,
I knew it was a Cyndi Lauper song, right?
and she was like, "This is a really good song. Like, I wonder why they wrote this song, or did they write this song
Wow.
specifically for this movie?" I'm like, "No,
Wow.
child, no.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
based on a Cyndi Lauper song." And I played it for her, and she was like, I like the one from Trolls better. I'm like, you don't know any better. But yeah, that's part of the fun of also being a parent is like
Yeah.
introducing these songs to your kids and then just sharing those moments with them.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. So
I agree. And it looks like this DJ Garnett, whoever this woman is, or I guess it's a Garnet because the picture is a Garnet.
mm,
There's two other public playlists on here. Maybe we should check those out and troll her. And
maybe
then go for a seafood bake together and we'll fly you out here and we'll go present her an award.
just like a simple thank you. Thank you for introducing these awesome playlists into our
Yeah.
lives. So yeah. So Stacey, anything else that you wanted to chat about before we wrap up?
Oh boy, this has been so much fun. It's funny, I'm on a lot of podcasts and I always talk about being an entrepreneur and being a blogger and being a mom and being a content creator, but this just absolutely filled my soul. And I'll say it's funny going along the lines of how all of this is trending so much. I wrote two separate posts maybe 5 years ago. One about 80s movies to watch with your family and one 90s movies to watch with your family. And the beauty of a blog and of a website is you write it and you publish it and then it lives on forever, right? And I always find it so funny to look at my trending posts every month because even though I might have written, however many posts this month, it doesn't necessarily mean that those are my trending ones. And my 90s movies has been in my top 3 for the whole last year.
Hmm.
And that just shows me that people are looking for these movies and looking to, go back to a simpler time with their families. And it makes me so happy for so many reasons. But I love that people are looking for good family movies. And I love that they're finding my posts and finding, it's a mix between some being obscure and some being well known. And like one of the ones that I always joke about, and I have yet to show my kids because I can't find it anywhere, is oh my God, it just fell out of my head. It's about rollerblading. Airborne. Do you remember the
Hmm.
movie Airborne?
Yeah.
So it was such an obscure movie that it's not available at the library. I don't think I've been able to find it streaming, but it's like one of those movies that it's like, why would anyone ever want to watch that? But I just remember my kids used to be really big into rollerblading, and I'm like, oh, I should show you this. And it's just funny how, with all the things available in streaming platforms, it's not like it's everything, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, I'm still a big fan of DVDs, and I know you mentioned the library a few times, so it makes me feel like I have a kindred library spirit here. I mean, we go to the library all the time. I still rent DVDs from the library. I used to rent CDs from the library. But very often when I want to show my kids a movie, I'll say, is it free on one of the platforms we pay for already? No. I'm just going to order it from the library and we'll see it in a couple days and, we'll watch it on DVD. And then my friends all make fun of me and good for them. But
No, I used to work at a family video, which is, the last great vestige of video rental services.
yeah.
And one of the joys of working at family video is just get talk to people about movies and even TV shows. But they would always get frustrated when we didn't have something available. And they're like, I don't I don't have like a lot of accounts for streaming, or I don't want to like stream this through like iTunes. Like I want the actual physical disc. So can you think of any other places where this would be available? As if I'd be like, oh, you could order it on Amazon. It's like, no, no, no,
Yep.
we don't want to, we just want to
Yep.
rent it and we just want to watch it. I was like, there's always the library. And there's something that clicks in people's heads like,
What?
why am I paying for movie rentals when I could just rent stuff for free at the library? I'm like,
Because
well,
no one thinks of the library. I had a
nobody
play
does.
date once when we first moved here with a friend of mine that I grew up with, and her daughter turned to her mom in the children's room of our public library and said, I love these books. Can we buy them? And I was like, have you never taken your child to the library before? What? And it was like a shocking experience. But I love the fact that you brought up a video store because I was talking to someone the other day about, so in our town, we used to have Blockbuster, we used to have Hollywood Video, we used to have West Coast Video. I don't know if you had all those by you.
Yeah.
And I remember on a Friday night, you'd have your parents drive you to Blockbuster Video, which was an entire gigantic space, right? And then you'd go to the new movie that was out a year ago, and then you would have all the boxes, and you'd have to see if it was behind there, and you'd be devastated that the 20 copies of this movie were gone. And
Mhm.
it's just funny to think about. Look, if I wanted to pay for these movies, I could press the button and pay $5 and not even have to get off my couch. I love the ritual of ordering it. And times in life at this point, we need to be patient for things because it's almost like exercising the muscle of patience, which people don't
Yep.
use anymore. But it's just, that, well, I guess you're not in New York. There's some sort of pop-up that opened that's supposed to be highlighting like the Blockbuster experience. It
Mm,
has some like funny, name, a play on the name of it, and it's like all these different, it's basically like an immersive experience of like a Blockbuster 80s 90 thing, which I haven't seen it yet. It just opened, but it looked kind of funny. But I was just laughing that Blockbuster Video now is being billed an immersive experience.
I know, right? It's so funny. I worked at a Hollywood Video in high school, and to
Yeah.
this day, that's still one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had because
Yeah.
just getting to talk with people about movies and just also just being around them in such a way of like cataloging and it's always a lot of fun. It just brings back a lot of great memories. So
Great. Yes, this has been so much fun.
yeah. Stacey, thank you so much
Yes.
for
Oh
for
my
your
gosh, my
time and thank
pleasure.
you so much for coming on. One last time, plug your stuff. Where can the people find
Sure.
you if they want to continue the conversation and just continue to follow you on your various social media platforms?
Thank you. So, if you want to check out the list of family friendly 80s movies and family friendly 90s movies, as well as so many other things, you can check out my blog on The Mint Chip Mama. And mama is MAMA.com. And I'm at The Mint Chip Mama across all social channels. And on Instagram, I do a lot of fun 80s and 90s stuff as well. And I always seem to find my 80s and 90s angle in no matter what I do. And yeah, and if anyone wants to reach out to me about anything, my email as well is themintchipmama@gmail.com. And I'm always happy to talk about this fun era of my life.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for your time and
Yeah,
looking forward to chatting with you more soon.
absolutely.
Well, my friends, the time has come to end this episode of Mix CD. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to anything and everything SPDM Crew wherever you get your podcast. Join us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, YouTube, and Blue Sky at SPDM Crew. Check out our website soon to be out at spdmcrew.com. You could follow our playlist on Spotify and Apple Music at Mike Hilty. Shout out to HiFlyer Creative Studios for making our awesome logo. Greatly appreciate their support. And if you have any marketing, logo, or brand standard needs, contact them at highflyercreative.com. If you've got a podcast idea or you're interested in being part of the SPDM crew as a guest or collaborating, email us at spdmcrew@gmail.com. Until next time, no matter what happens now, you shouldn't be afraid because I know today has been the most perfect day I've ever seen.